their trips when you get to a certain point, when you get to a certain age. I don't know that there's a magic time when this happens, but for example, when you get to that point where you're like, you don't want to just go to a place and check off all the things to see and to do, and have said that you've been there and that you've seen the stuff, and then you come back and have some great pictures that you've probably already put on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. Sometimes we get to a point where we're just looking for something more, but we might not know exactly what that more is. So for example, I still have some things on my quote unquote bucket list, places I'd like to visit, but they're not particularly calling to me in the way that they once were. And I've been wondering kind of what is that? Why is the traditional travel sense, how has that changed, and what does that mean for us? I'm not going to get into statistics or anything like that. It's just something I've been thinking about, and decided that I wanted to chat about that. So if you're joining me live, feel free to type in any of your thoughts into the chat box. For those of you that are listening to this a little bit later, feel free to message me with your thoughts. I would love to hear from you. Just head over to Substack, inspiration.thecaminocalls.com. So I think some of us get to the point where we're looking for something more than just a vacation. And vacations have often have become these things. There's that phrase in English, at least, when you come back from your vacation and you need a vacation from your vacation, because we don't rest a lot of times on our vacations. We're doing things, we're constantly going and need to see this and wait on this line to go see this, big monument or famous museum or whatever it is. And we kind of are having these nonstop vacations. And for some people, that's fine. I have one of my siblings who this is how she travels and she loves it, which is great for her. And I'm not knocking any of that. It's just that for some of us, and me in particular, I'm not particularly interested in going to a place just to see the stuff. What I'm more interested now, I find, is that I'm looking for a bit more of a connection to a place and to its people as well. And so, I always have enjoyed talking to people. My husband will tell you that I can pretty much, and a lot of friends actually will say this too, that I can strike up a conversation with almost anyone. And I enjoy traveling for the people that I meet, not necessarily for all the things that I see, although absolutely I've seen some amazing things. But most of my stories from my trips come around the people that I met and the stories that kind of arose from there. For example, and I'll give you a very simple one here. This must have been probably at least 15 years ago. I was taking a train. I'm not sure if it was from Poughkeepsie to New York City or New York City back up to Poughkeepsie, but either way, a woman sat down next to me and she had a cage on her lap and there was some sort of critter inside of it. And I wasn't exactly sure what kind of critter it was. I thought I knew, but I just started a conversation with her. And it turns out it was a rat, which, you can find all over New York City in the subways. But she was actually a college student and she was part of a rat rescue. So rescues where they would take animals that had experiments done to them and the college no longer or university no longer wanted them, and they would actually get them adopted out as pets. And I had never heard of such a thing, let alone imagine such a thing existed. And she was taking this rat in particular to a home in Westchester County, New York. Now, for those of you that don't know, that's like saying, it's just a very high-end suburb of New York City. And she was explaining that she was going because she was bringing the rat because the family had wanted this as a pet for their child. And I hope the child wanted it as well. And she was saying, though, that she was going because she had to assess whether the family, was a good enough home, basically, for this rat. And I absolutely was dying laughing to myself because for those of you that know Westchester County, I don't think there's a home there that wouldn't be suitable for most of us, let alone for a rat. But anyway, there's stories like these that you just that make my love of travel. That's kind of what I love about it. And so, for those of you that are looking for something a little bit more from your travels, that's a lot of times, I shouldn't say a lot of times, but sometimes how people end up finding the Camino de Santiago. And there's now this lingo around this transformational travel, whatever you want to call it. The Camino's been around for, over 1200 years. So it's been around much longer than transformational travel, the term has been. But the what are some of the reasons that we want to do this stuff, want to travel a little bit differently? And I think part of it is that we are seeing a lot more things that we couldn't necessarily see with our own eyes, 30 or 40 years ago, 50, 100 years ago, without actually going there. So yeah, we could see pictures and books and things, but now we're seeing videos. We're seeing, someone's complete experience of a place. And I feel like I read some research at some point that said that you do that often enough and it feels kind of like you've been there. You have that same feeling. So what makes, you can have a bunch of influencers, YouTubers, Instagrammers, whoever, go to that very same place, take the very same pictures. I don't much enjoy looking up, travel videos anymore. It's always the same, the top 6 things to see in Sevilla, or, the top things you must not miss when you go to Segovia, or whatever it is, which is great because I am actually going on a trip this, in a couple weeks. And one of my planned stops is indeed Segovia, and I do want to see the Roman aqueduct there. But I take experiences a little deeper. I can promise you I will be talking to plenty of folks in Spanish and getting their stories and just learning about the place, the people, the history, etc. So I'm not knocking any of that traditional tourism, but I'm just also pointing out that for those people that are looking for something a little different, perhaps, and I titled this, what if your next trip could change you? And so some of you listening may have already been on a life-changing trip. And if so, I would love to hear about that. And trips can be life-changing for a variety of reasons. They expose you to ideas and thoughts and things that you had never even heard of, thought about, seen before. So for example, when I lived in Valencia, Spain, I remember I was at a women's coffee hour and I met a lovely woman from Great Britain. And I don't know how we got on this discussion of travels. And she started telling me about a trip that she had absolutely loved. And she went to the beaches in Syria. Now, as an American, traveling on a vacation to the Middle East had never crossed my mind. The Middle East, the way I grew up, was always in my head a dangerous place to go. But now that I've traveled a whole lot more, I realize where that image comes from, and that it could definitely be a dangerous place for certain people to go, certain nationalities. I am lucky enough to have 2 passports, so I can travel either on my American passport or my Italian passport. And so I've considered that as well, that that some of these places that I might think of as no-go zones for travel are not necessarily that for other people, and even for me if I was kind of exposed to it. So for example, another example, I was just speaking to a wonderful woman, Karen Rosenblum from Spain Less Traveled, just a couple days ago, and she talked about her most recent trip, you guessed it, to Syria. And I was just, again, like, this is quite amazing to me, that people that I know, that I am talking to, go to this country, this region of the world that to me had been kind of like off limits for travel. Should my parents be listening, I don't have any upcoming plans to go to the Middle East at this point, but my point is that in talking to people, you can kind of open your eyes, your mind, your heart, your spirit to so many things that you had never thought about before. Now, would I have met these women had I not traveled? Who knows? I'm not in that business of knowing what would happen if I did this or didn't do this. Not many of us can predict that. However, there is this idea that one of the things that traveling can do, and one of the ways that it can change you, is by the people that you meet. And that is one of the reasons that I absolutely love the Camino de Santiago. For those of you that don't know, last year, people from 183 different countries walked in to Santiago de Compostela. The statistics for this are kept in the pilgrim office there. For those of you that don't know, the Camino de Santiago is a network of pilgrimage trails over 1,200 years old, culminating in arrival for some pilgrims, a lot of pilgrims, in Santiago de Compostela, Spain. Traditionally, it was a Catholic pilgrimage route. These days, there's people of all faiths and no faiths at all walking it, all ages, from obviously, as I just said, 183 different countries. And I don't know a lot of other places in the world that have that variety of people working together towards the same goal. And I actually looked this up a little bit and said, are there other tourist destinations where you have people from that many countries that are there every year? There were some things that, maybe Disney World, maybe the Eiffel Tower, maybe Times Square, but none of those places either keep data on this or allow their data on this to be seen. The only place I found that came close to this number of countries was number one, the Olympics, which isn't necessarily one location. It's a different location, obviously, every couple of years. And I want to say in the Summer Olympics, somewhere over 200 different Olympic committees, national Olympic committees are represented. The Olympic Committee recognizes, there's, depending on who you talk to, how many countries are there in the world, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to get into that. So that is one thing. However, and then the other thing is actually another pilgrimage route, the Hajj, which takes place every year for Muslims in Saudi Arabia. And they also see people from over 170 different countries. However, that experience specifically is limited only to Muslims, which is, again, one of the reasons that I love the Camino de Santiago, is that it doesn't matter who you are, what your background is, where you're from, how old you are, what your physical ability is. I've met all kinds of people on the Camino de Santiago. For some of you that are saying, yeah, I don't know that I could walk something like that, I would say, well, you don't have to walk. You can ride a bike. There are people that do it in wheelchairs. There are people that ride horses doing it. There's so many different ways. And so I think for me, the way that the Camino has been a trip that has changed me, I think part of it is because it has brought me so many connections with so many people from so many places that I will probably never go in my lifetime. Of course, I feel like when I write my memoir, it'll be called Never Say Never. So I'm not saying that I would not get to all of these different countries. It's not something I aspire to at this point. But anyway, my point is that I have met people from countries where, honestly, I have to ask them now, remind me exactly where that is, like Kyrgyzstan. I know it was a former Soviet republic. Could I point it out on a map? I'm sorry for those of you that are more geographically inclined than I am. I do not yet know all of the locations of all of the stands on a map, but that's something I should probably improve upon. But anyway, so I think, as I was saying, like, I think a trip has an ability to change you. And you don't have to want to change. Some of us might be perfectly content with who we are. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong and you need to change, but I'm just saying that a trip like the Camino de Santiago is one where change is certainly possible simply by being there and talking to people. I've had some of the most amazing conversations in my life on the Camino de Santiago with people who I will never see again. And I think that's one of the reasons also, for those of you that are big travelers, and you're like, yeah, I always meet really cool people when I travel. Well, I think we're more open to talking to strangers when we travel. Not all of us. I remember specifically one person I was traveling with who, we struck up a conversation with the people at the table next to us. They were from a country other than the one that we were in. We were talking about different travels. We basically chatted throughout our whole dinner. And then the person that I was traveling with said to me, hey, tomorrow night, can we not talk to other people at the restaurant? And I sat there stunned, like, why would you not want to talk to other people? This is where you meet other people. It seemed such a foreign idea to me that I would just, um, you know, make a specific effort not to talk to anyone else around me. Not to say that every meal I go to, I talk to someone else, but it would never cross my mind to um, to to ask someone or even put that request on anyone to say, hey, don't talk to anybody else except me. You know, I don't know, maybe in a relationship you need to have one of those talks, whatever. But anyway, I realize that this is not everyone. Not everyone speaks so easily to other people or enjoys speaking to other people. Now, do you have to do this on the Camino de Santiago or on any trip at all? Absolutely not. Travel however you want. I am not here to tell anyone how to do anything in particular. However, my business is helping people plan their Camino, so I'm happy to tell you what things I think might make your Camino what you want it to be. And talking to strangers is definitely one of them. Now, there have been numerous times that I have read different things on different Camino forums from people who are saying, I'm on the Camino, I have hardly met anyone, there's lots of people around, but I haven't, like, not for lack of people around, but for whatever reason. And what I've realized is that not everyone knows how to strike up a conversation with a stranger. If you grew up in the US, as I did, you were taught not to talk to strangers. And I don't know how it is nowadays. I don't have children by choice, but we is a fine balance to strike now between talking to somebody that you don't know. It's not like I'm a kid anymore, and that's a hard and fast no. And even when I was a kid, there were certain situations where there were people that I didn't know, but I knew it was okay to talk to them because we were whatever at some party with my parents, and so clearly everyone there must be friendly, I would think, or something along those lines. I'm not looking to get into all of the history of this, but I do realize that there are people that don't necessarily know how best to strike up a conversation with other people. So for those of you that may be listening and you're like, how on earth would you do this? On the Camino de Santiago, it is pretty easy. You're gonna know who the other pilgrims are walking the trail because of how they're dressed. We're all wearing hiking clothes pretty much. We're all walking along the trail. Sometimes you'll see local people out walking their dogs on the trail that happens to also be the Camino de Santiago, and you can talk to them as well. But usually when people walk by, there is a greeting that we say to each other, Buen Camino, have a good walk, basically. And I will sometimes precede that with hello, bonjour, hola, which is hello in the 3 languages that I know how to speak. And then, or sometimes I'll just say buen camino, hola, like I might follow it up with hello. And that's kind of like my clue to people, like, hey, I speak these languages if you want to chat. And some people will just say buen camino, or some people will kind of look at me and be like, surprised that I speak, I don't know, whatever language it is that they were surprised to hear. And so just something as simple as a hello or as a buen camino can indeed start a conversation. Often I'll follow it up with if they, smile and turn to me and say hello, they might say, how you doing? How's your walk going? Oh, great. How are you? It's really hard, that hill back there. Like you're just making small talk, really. And, small talk can lead to, an hours long conversation if you want that. The other thing that's nice about the Camino de Santiago is that everyone's pretty open to the fact that some people don't want to talk for hours, which is totally fine. I've had conversations with people where I've gotten to the point through no fault of theirs where I just, want some quiet time for a bit. And so I might say, this has been a great conversation. I'm so glad that we, got to connect. I'm hoping maybe I'll see you again on the Camino at some point, but I want to take some time to walk on my own for a little bit. And most people are like, yeah, sure, totally fine. Lovely to chat with you. If I'm meant to see you, I'll see you again. Because the Camino is one of those funny things where you never know when you're going to run into someone again, or even if you are. So that's, one way to just strike up a conversation. When you're in a town, uh, again, you'll know who the pilgrims are. Most of us are still wearing hiking clothes, just clean ones from the ones that we walked in. We've since showered and changed and put on pretty much the same stuff, but cleaner. And you can just, I mean, there's so many times where I have, people are out at a cafe or a bar or whatever, and I can identify them as pilgrims. Maybe I overhear them speaking one of the languages that I speak, and I'll just go up to them and say, hey, can I join you? And for those of you that are thinking, oh my gosh, you really do? Well, yeah, you can do that. And people have a right to say, no, we're kind of having a private conversation here. I've never actually had that, but it's because I, you know, I kind of know who I'm saying it to. I don't just walk up to random strangers and ask if I can join them. But when I clearly know that people are pilgrims, or they're people that I know are pilgrims because I've seen them on the trail earlier in the day. Another great way to start a conversation is to give somebody a compliment. Whatever, that shirt looks great on you. Or they've got maybe a day pack on with a flag on it and it's a country you've been to. Or they have something on their shirt says something that you identify with, or whatever. Like, can you just come up with a way to compliment somebody? And this is just a nice thing to do on a regular basis. Feel free to just figure out ways to compliment people in your day-to-day life. Do it on the Camino. You'll strike up all kinds of conversations. Often we can't do it with clothes on the Camino. Most of us are sweating or bundled up, or any of that kind of stuff. So it's not like we're in our best looking kind of phase of life. But so anyway, back to this idea of a trip changing you. So with the people you talk to, absolutely, that's one way. But other things about the Camino in particular is some of the ways that it has changed me. I remember specifically on my first one, was the biggest lesson I learned was to accept the generosity of other people. And this was fascinating to me because I grew up in the Catholic religion. Uh, and in my head, you would give to the poor. And so if someone was accepting generosity, that meant that they were poor. So that there was no need for me to accept generosity. I didn't feel like I was poor. I was not in need. I've been blessed with plenty of things in life. So who was I to accept something? And of course, I didn't come up with any of this until like a year or more after this Camino, when I was trying to process what on earth happened in that experience. But what happened on that Camino specifically was there was a woman who said to me, I forget, you get into all kinds of deep conversations on the Camino. And she said to me, when someone offers you something, it's really not about you. She said, by you accepting their generosity, that makes them feel good. Now, am I here on the planet to make everyone else feel wonderful about themselves? Who knows? I mean, you can say whatever you want about that, but I loved that idea. She said it's not really about you necessarily having, who you are as you're accepting that. Are you someone in need? Do they think you're in need? Da da da. She said, you're just making someone happy by accepting something that they have offered to give you. And we talked about this, how people don't usually offer something unless they actually mean it. And if they are offering something and they didn't mean to offer it, well, then that's on them. That's a whole other issue that we're not going to get into right now. But that was really life-changing for me, for her to point out the gift that I was basically giving other people by accepting their generosity. And that has been a lesson that has stayed with me and absolutely changed my life over the years. I have been the beneficiary of a great many wonderful things from a great many wonderful people. I have a friend who says I seem to fall backwards, or however that phrase is, into these things all the time. People wanting to help me out or offer me something, or I mean, to a level that is probably not necessarily with the level that other people see. And I'm not saying that I have all of this stuff just thrown at me, but for example, when I first decided to move to Asheville, North Carolina, I was finishing up a 1-year chosen sabbatical year. I saved up some money, decided not to work for the year and do all these things that I had wanted to do, one of which was the Camino de Santiago. And over the course of that year, I met a couple who were in their 70s at the time. And I knew at this point after in my travels that I wanted to move to Asheville, North Carolina. When I started this year-long sabbatical, I departed from New York State where I was living at the time. And I knew I wanted to move to Asheville. And I said that, to them. We were discussing it. I was actually in Asheville, met them there. And after a bit of a discussion, they have hosted people for a night or two through an organization called couch surfing, which I'm not part of anymore, but back then it was a big deal. And back then I was, traveling really cheap because I was, living without working for a year. Anyway, I stayed with them for a couple nights, and by the end of it, they said to me, hey, if you move to Asheville and you need a place to land, you are welcome to come live in our house with us. They had a whole second floor upstairs with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, and they said the second floor, one of the bedrooms in the bathroom would be yours. They said sometimes we host other people. They would go in the other bedroom. I was like, yeah, fine. Actually, at first I was like, I can't believe they're offering me this, and I don't know that I'll take them up on this. But I ended up, they made that offer before my first Camino. And on that Camino, this woman was talking about accepting other people's generosity. And I thought about this couple that had made this offer to me. They were both retired teachers. They loved having other younger people around them. And they really just liked helping other people out. And so eventually that's exactly what I did. I moved to Asheville, North Carolina, and I lived with them initially when I moved down there. And we all just kind of agreed that we'd do it until I found a different place to live or it stopped working out. We had a wonderful time. I explored Asheville. I would come in the evenings and tell them what I discovered and who I met. And I remember one point in particular, they said, "You're better than television." Because they had been in Asheville for, over years and years and years. And I was telling them about all these new things going on and my adventures, and they just loved hearing it. I loved sharing it. I remember one night in particular, I'd been on like a date that didn't go well or something. And I brought home chocolate ice cream and we all just sat around the dining room table and we, I walked in and they asked me how was the date. And I said, well, I just bought a bunch of ice cream. And they said, oh, let's sit down and talk about it. So anyway, my point is that people in general are kind and generous. And so that first Camino, that lesson of not only are people kind and generous, but it is okay no matter who you are to accept generosity. And that has been something that has helped me enormously. And I thank that woman on that first Camino. I will never see her again. I have no idea who she was. I don't remember at this point. But it was a great lesson for me. I had always been, not always, I would say, the Camino, though, made me more grateful. The Camino was one of those places I remember like so many times just stopping. Actually, this happened right on my first day. I remember this happening. I just stopped climbing up those Pyrenees. Well, because I needed a break climbing up the Pyrenees as well. But just stopping, looking around at the beauty around me. And I had tears in my eyes. I remember writing a blog post that day that basically said, if I died tomorrow, this would all be worth it. Like if I didn't get to arrive in Santiago, if I didn't get to walk this trail anymore, this would all be worth it. I was just so grateful for the experience that I'd had up until then. And a similar thing happened a few years later when I brought my 72 something like that year old friend Lois with me on the Camino. And when we got to our starting point, she said, Rebecca, she said, even if I never step foot from here, she said, this has been such an amazing journey already. I will never forget it. And she was grateful to me for offering her that opportunity. That's a whole other story that I've talked about a little bit, and I interviewed Lois as part of Camino Conversations. So if you're wanting to know more about that story, feel free to go back to the Camino Conversations page and or on this podcast or however you're watching me and look for that conversation with Lois. So those were some of the big things: the gratitude, the accepting gifts from others, also the slowing down. I loved that on the Camino, it didn't, one of the reasons I like doing Caminos on my own is because it doesn't matter how fast or slow I walk. Nobody cares because I'm on my own and I can do whatever I want. And so if I want to stop for coffee and decide to sit there for 2 hours, I can because there's nobody waiting for me. Nobody cares. Um, it's whatever I want to do. It's why I usually recommend to people, if you can do your first Camino on your own, I highly recommend it. You just learn so much about yourself. You meet a lot more people when you're on your own. I get that that's not everybody's thing. Totally fine. But anyway, that's slowing down. It's almost like the Camino gave me a chance to slow down because it was the only thing I had to do. I got up in the morning and my sole job that day was to walk to another place and find some food along the way. And that was pretty much it. And it was such a simple way of living. And a lot of people come back from Camino and start decluttering a ton because they've lived with so little on the Camino de Santiago and kind of realize you don't really need that much in life. Some of you that have not, that choose to travel with plenty of luggage might not feel this way, but on the Camino de Santiago, you don't have to carry everything on your back. There are luggage transport systems in place, but they do have limits on the size of your bag, the weight of your bag, etc. So I still tell people, even if you're not carrying all your stuff on your back, you still should try and live pretty simply. It's just kind of a way to do the Camino. It's not that you have to, take away every single creature comfort you have. It's not about that unless you want it to be. Some people do the Camino sacrificing a whole lot. I usually tell people it's going to be hard enough. You don't need to bring on anything else to make it harder for yourself. But anyway, so yeah, simplifying is another thing that a lot of us kind of tend to do even more of, even if we were people that like to live simply to begin with. Later on, as far as some of the things that changed for me about the Camino, I had been writing before the Camino de Santiago, but I had been hired from my first Camino to write while I was on the trail. And that was such a wonderful experience. And that love of writing and sharing it with people has stuck with me for sure. And then as I did successive Caminos, one thing that changed is that my father started coming with me. And for those of you that have not read my stuff before or don't know of me and my relationship with my father, I always like to describe him as he's a guy who, eats donuts for breakfast and hot dogs for lunch. I don't think he's ever stepped into a gym in his life, but he's an Italian American that has more energy at, what is he now, 78 or something, than I will ever have or hope to have. And he came with me one year on the Camino because he just wanted to see what it was about. And I was just stunned because it's totally not his kind of trip, or so I thought. My parents are the kind that go on Viking River cruises to, wherever, China and, the Danube and etc. They're the kind of folks, not the kind of folks, I mean, their travels up until that point had been the kind of things where you get off the plane and everything's kind of planned for you and you know where you're going to sleep every night and anything you need you can get. And not and I do the Camino knowing where I'm going to sleep at night when I do it with my dad. But anyway, he came along. I thought he was going to be like, this is nuts. I don't understand what it is you like about this thing or why you keep coming back. But instead he fell in love with it, and we are about to head off on our 6th Camino together. So that is another thing that absolutely changed. I could have never imagined having 6 successive weeks of travel one-on-one with my father. For those of you that know him, he's it's the Camino's ideal for being with my dad because there are so many other people that on the Camino, because he is just nonstop, and so there's so many other people he can meet, so I can take a nap. Anyway, I'm not going to get too much into that, but that is another thing that certainly has changed for me. And then, of course, I about, what is it, a year and a half ago, started this business called the Camino Calls, where I help people make their dreams of doing the Camino happen. I led my first trip, my first small group trip on the Camino last year. I'm getting ready to lead another one in September. So lots of things have changed for me. I'm not saying that your life is going to completely change when you do the Camino. My friend Lois said to me, and I love this, you can't plan an epiphany. So if you're walking the Camino and you're hoping by the time you're done, you're going to have the answer to some big question, you should probably know that that may or may not happen. You can't necessarily expect to get what you think you're going to get. But the Camino is one of those things that they say, what is it, the Rolling Stones or somebody? I don't know who the song is. You can't always get what you want, but you can. Nah, I'm going to mess it up. I don't remember what it is. But anyway, the Camino will give you what you need, not necessarily what you want. And I think some of us have had that experience as well on the Camino de Santiago. So if you are looking for a trip that is a little different from the usual, that could potentially change you, but only in absolutely wonderful ways, I would highly recommend looking into the Camino de Santiago. And to that end, you'll probably meet people like me who go back and do it multiple times. And I know there's some people, even listening to this live, that have done it multiple times. And that's just something I wanted to touch on briefly. Why do people keep going back to it? So, for example, yeah, some people fall in love with Paris and they might go back 3, 4, 5, 6 times. But the Camino de Santiago, there are a good number of us right here in Asheville, North Carolina, that have done it 10, 12, 15 times. I'm one of those people. And so, what is it that has somebody continue to go back and do something that you've already done before? And to this, I usually say to people, why do you go back to your favorite restaurants? Why do you keep watching your favorite sports teams? Why do you keep hanging out with the same people? There's obviously something there that gives you joy, that you like doing, that gives you peace or something. There's some reason that we keep going back to things. And for me, the Camino is just like that. There is just this, this idea of facing a challenge head on and accomplishing something. I mean, we didn't even talk much about the actual fact that you're walking 9, 10, 12, 15 miles in a day, depending on how you choose to do the Camino. So you have that challenge, the meeting all the people, and then the time to be in your own head, because there's not wall-to-wall people all the time on all of the Camino de Santiago routes. Yes, if you do the Camino Francés, the Camino Portuguese, pretty much any time between May and September, there's going to be plenty of people on that route. That doesn't mean that you're not going to ever have any time to yourself. It might just be not as much as I would have if I do some of the quieter routes, like the Camino Invierno, the Camino Bastan, the Camino San Salvador. There's dozens, probably more than dozens of routes for the Camino de Santiago in Spain, let alone in Portugal, France. And then, I mean, I've met people that have left their door in Germany, left their door in Belgium. For those of you that read my newsletter, you probably saw the story a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, about the guy I met who walked with his donkey all the way from Belgium to Santiago de Compostela and then turned around and walked back and stopped at the house I was living in Spain at the time. And we had a wonderful time together and are still in touch to this day. So anyway, yeah, if you're looking for a trip that will change you, but pretty much only in ways for good, or might not change you at all, but will just have an amazing impact on your life, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you look into the Camino de Santiago. And if you need some support and encouragement, by all means, let me know. I am at thecaminocalls.com, and you can read my old newsletters from there. You can watch or listen to some of these videos, podcasts, however you're listening to me right now. Would love nothing more than to be that person that helps you to go from dreaming about the Camino to doing it. with that, I wish you all a buen camino, and I will see you next week. Bye bye.